Hey there, YouTube land. Big Dave here. It's June the 17th. I don't know. I'm still using. I'll get it turned around though. I'm still using this Christmas tree mug. Anyway, so I wanted to get to a viewer question, right, or just something. And this one is from Funky Kingston. He's been following along for quite a while. But he says, like, he asked me about my influences, and I said, well, that's a good topic. And so here I'm hanging out. It's a nice night, and the porch. I says, well, I'm going to talk about this for a few minutes. Um, First of all, when I was growing up, I started to play the clarinet, and that was like in fourth grade, third grade, the summer of third grade. I played clarinet, but and I played for a while. I was all right. I don't gonna say I was even good because there were some other people that were like way better. And then around eighth grade, I was playing, but I was lazy. I didn't want to practice. So when I went to high school, and I was in ninth grade, I had a new teacher in high school. That was Dick Teresi, and he was a really good sax player. He played clarinet. He studied with Leon Rushinoff. So I practiced, and I was trying out for regionals and all state and all that kind of stuff. And then I got interested in jazz, but I was practicing like Mozart. I was practicing like the clarinet concerto because that was the audition material for the high school. And then this is in the 70s. This is 75, 74 we're talking about. And then I guess I was getting more interested in jazz. However, I had a great friend of mine, Michael, and he played trombone. He was excellent, and he played accordion, and we had a band together for a while too. Um, and we used to hang out together in high school, but he knew all the polkas and stuff, so we used to play polkas, Hungarian chadashes, and then there were some local musicians at the time that were there was some really good clarinet and sax players in my area because there was always music on weekends happening. Or one guy, Carl Stabile, worked with my father in the factory, in the steel factory, and he played with Tony Bennett, and he played with Von Monroe earlier, and he was a really good tenor player. And so he was an influence of mine. He had big sound. He owned like three nice Mark Sixes, and he always played on one mouthpiece. He only had one mouthpiece. It was a old duckbill, Berg Larson 95/1, and he used vibrator reeds. That's what John Coltrane used to play on, and he never played on anything else. That's all he ever used. He had the one mouthpiece, and he had three Mark Sixes, I remember, and they were all really nice ones. They were like older ones with the ribbons on the bottom and the nice engraving, and he had a big sound. But like I said, he played with a lot of different people. He played with Tony Bennett, and um, he did his stint with Von Monroe, and he had a big sound. But when he came out of the war, I guess, or whatever, he went and he was working in this factory. And then there was another local guy, Donnie LaPenta, and I'm not sure if he's still alive. If he is, he's definitely in his late 80s or almost 90 or whatever. But he was another really good tenor player, and he could play all kinds of stuff. But he played kind of like, wow, he could play ballads, honky tonk, and he played the Berg Larson too, 100/2. He owned one tenor, and he had an alto King Super 20, and played clarinet. He used to play a white brill hard mouthpiece. I remember that. And he always used plastic cover reeds. But the guy sounded great. He was a great player. Even later on, I took my kids to hear him play in a park one time. He must have been 70 some years old, and he was playing up a storm. And there was another guy too. One day I was playing. Well, I did get involved a lot in German polka music. Polish music, Hungarian music. That was what was paying money. Those were the gigs. And I was only like 16. I was working in like two different polka bands, and then we used to belong to the union because you had to belong to the union in those days. If you wanted to work in certain places, you had to be a member of the union to work in the union hall. I mean, you have to belong to the union hall in order to work in certain places. So the thing was, there's somebody else that she doesn't know. Sophia, give us a break. Shh. So anyway, it's dogs are good, but then when there's somebody out that they don't know, they go like crazy. So anyway, so I used to play a lot of polka stuff, and then I had quite a career in polka music for quite a few years. It made me a lot of cash playing clarinet and tenor, But when I got interested in jazz, I was listening to Eddie Lockjaw Davis, um, Zoot Sims, and I like John Clemmer. I used to listen to something about John Clemmer. I just kind of like. I was interested in his album Cry. This is where he played all by himself solo, and I had a passing interest in John Coltrane, but I can't say that was a big influence. But Sonny Stitt, Zoot Sims, Eddie Lockjaw Davis, Johnny Griffin. I used to work on Johnny Griffin's lines, but sound wise, I always was more drawn to like Eddie Lockjaw Davis. I had the album, them two of them playing together, and I had other albums. Tom Scott, Tom Scott was early on was another one, and then there was a guy that used to play on a lot of pop albums, and I don't even remember his name now. He played on Leo Sayers' album, uh, "When I Need You" or whatever it was back in the '70s, and I always thought the guy had a hip sound. Grover Washington, um, you know, and then later on, I started studying with. I was playing a gig in a park outside, and there was a guy that came up to me and he goes, "Well, you play pretty good, for a young kid." Because I was like 18 or 17 at the time, I don't know. And he says, "You play good for a kid, blah blah blah." And he says, "You should go study with this guy Muzzy." And Muzzy, like, he's passed on now. The guy turned my world around. I went there and I took some lessons in a little closet, and he just had this. He was a student of Joe Allard also, but he had this big sound, and he was very hip. Like he could play stuff that was just he could only play 2 3 notes, and it was like it was hip. Just the way he said it. He only had to play 2 notes, and you were already like, wow, man, this guy's unbelievable. Just the sound and the way he directed himself. And he was a funny guy, too. So I learned from him a lot of stuff about the saxophone. And then I studied the clarinet in New York for years after that. When I was 17 already, I was going to New York on the bus. I studied harmony theory and ear training in Juilliard, and then I was studying with a couple teachers in New York, just different people. Joe Allard, David Weber. There was another local teacher here who was a longtime student of Joe Allard's, Chris Peterson. I studied with him for years, on and off. Different things, and I had other teachers. I had a lot of teachers. Mitch Weiss was a great clarinet teacher. I didn't study too much saxophone, to be honest with you. It was a clarinet. But then, as far as going, and getting involved with different things, I think I saw, Wayne Shorter. That was another big inspiration for me. And that's when I really started to change things that I was doing. It was Wayne Shorter. I was working on different things in Wayne's music, and Michael Brecker to an extent, but not so much. There was a period of time when I used to go work in New York sometimes, and somebody would come up to me and say, "Oh man, you sound like Bob Berg, and you should have your own style and all this stuff." And the thing was, I never listened to Bob Berg. I didn't even know who the guy really was, But my other influences. Sonny Rollins, the Trio album off of Live at the Vanguard. That was always a fascinating album to me. I listened to that many times. And then he had another newer, hipper album that was like more modern, and I liked that album. I used to listen to that. So Sonny Rollins, that was another thing, and but those are the guys that I listened to, and I used to take Hank Mobley, the blowing sessions, but I always like Lee Morgan, the trumpet player. I used to work on his lines all the time. I used to work on Lee Morgan lines. I love Lee Morgan. I always thought he played, like he played great. So anyway, I got to check the time here because they're going to shut this off. No, I still got a couple minutes. But that was really it. And then I have to say, like Wayne Shorter, that was a big influence for me. I saw Wayne Shorter play live at Weather Report with Jocko and those guys. I saw Wayne when he got the key to Newark. He was in William Patterson College. He played soprano the whole night. Kirk Lightsey was on piano. I think Rufus Reed played bass. I don't remember who played drums. I just don't. It could have been Eddie Gladden. I mean, I just don't remember. And I saw Dexter live. Dexter was, I don't want to say Dexter was like a big influence for me, but I always listened to a lot of Dexter. But I wouldn't say that I was like emulating or copying. I was more into other stuff, and that's it, and just practicing all kinds of, I practice a lot of classical music, clarinet, not so much saxophone. The saxophone I used to practice jazz. The clarinet I used to practice all classical music, all my scales and arpeggios, and I memorized a couple concertos, the Weber concertos, both of them. I knew them almost note for note from beginning to end. The Mozart concerto, I knew almost, the whole thing by memory. I know a lot of other pieces, the concertino. I worked on a lot of clarinet music. I played all the Rose books. I mean, I studied all that stuff. So, and then, okay, so the last thing is, I guess it was 1983 or 82, 83, I guess. I started working with Harry Leahy, the guitar player. I used to, work with Michelle Legrand, Phil Woods, all those guys. And I worked quite a bit with Harry Leahy. And I learned a lot from him. I mean, I was young. I was 20, in my early 20s. And Harry's just amazing. What can I say? I have nothing to say. Harry was an incredible, incredible musician, guitar player. I worked a lot of gigs with him in the New Jersey area. I did a lot of different things with him. That's where I met, he used to work with guys like, I don't know, Steve Gilmore and different drummers that, he worked with Phil, that whole band that did Live at the Showboat. I worked with some of those guys down in Princeton University. We played a gig there, and all those guys were there. I was on that gig. It was crazy. I mean, that was just blew my mind, because I was only in my 20s, and I was working with these guys that were working with Phil Woods, and it was just nuts because, Harry was incredible. And, I mean, what couldn't you learn from somebody that was such a genius? And then he passed away from, liver cancer. So, all right. So, that's what was happening. And I remember this one thing, Count Basie with Zoot Sims, I Surrender Dear. That's a great album. The tune, I remember the organ and Count Basie playing organ. I was attracted to that song. Sonny Stitt with any of the organ trio stuff where he plays tunes. I don't care for the blues so much, the tunes when he plays changes and all that stuff. All right. Have a good night. I'm going to finish my coffee. Bye.